Every CEO's journey has its Everest. The moments when the path forward feels steep, uncertain, and alone. With Sherpa CEO coaching, you don't climb alone. Our experienced coaches are your guides, helping you break through barriers, sharpen your strategy, strengthen your leadership, and build a team that can carry you higher. With tailored one-on-one coaching, strategic planning, and real accountability, your summit is within reach. Sherpa CEO Coaching, your guide to confidence, clarity, and extraordinary business growth. Get coached and learn more at sherpaceo.com.
Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Journey with your host, Dave Westcott. The Entrepreneurial Journey is a weekly podcast that streams live every Tuesday at 9:15 a.m. Pacific on Dave's YouTube channel and LinkedIn profile. Now here's Dave with this week's episode.
Good morning and welcome to the Entrepreneurial Journey. I'm your host, Dave Westcott, and I have with me this morning special guest, Frieda Caplan, owner of Frieda Caplan Executive Coaching and Consulting. Karen, good morning.
Good morning, Dave.
How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. I've already been up for a couple hours, and had a couple calls. That's what we entrepreneurs do.
That's right. You stay busy no matter what is happening. Now,
that is correct.
I love to run these marathons. I get into these marathons, and you have also, from what I understand, you've ran a couple marathons, right? You've done a half marathon. Have you done a full marathon or just the halves?
I've not done a full. I've done 4 half marathons. Thanks to our mutual inspiration, Jack Daly. During COVID, I did reluctantly 4 half marathons.
That's awesome. Jack is absolutely wonderful. I love him. And I love the newsletter that I get from you. So I think once a month a newsletter comes out, right? And you send that via email.
So actually it's weekly. I think maybe you're just really busy. So every Friday morning, yes. I've been writing a blog / newsletter, business newsletter since 2011. And so I do that. I write them live. It's a human being that writes them. I don't use AI except as a thought partner.
Wow. That's very cool. I love that. So they come out weekly. I think I must read them monthly. And like you said, they're busy, but I really like them. I like what I get out of them. I like the information. I like the input. What was it that got you started writing these newsletters 15 years ago?
So it actually was John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods. He wrote an op-ed piece in USA Today back in, I'm going to say either 2010 or 2011. And for some reason I read it. And he talks about how his opinion on something. And then he got a lot of crap from people in the market, in the public market, saying, hey, you have this opinion on this, but actually you're the CEO of Whole Foods, you're a public company. I don't know if that's aligned. And he said, I think every CEO should have their own voice separate from the corporation. And so I read that and I interpreted it and said, I agree with that. I've been running my family business for 30 or 40 years. And actually, I have a voice that I want to share separate from the corporation as CEO. So I went to my director of marketing and said, I think I want to write a blog. And he said to me, I've been waiting for this conversation. I already have the name. So he told me the name of my blog should be What's on Karen's Plate. And I started writing. And, when you write a blog, it's a little, and you know this from doing a podcast, it's a little more than just, writing a blog. You have to think about it. You have to find your voice. You have to find an editor. You have to have a process to get it published. So I started doing that in 2011.
Wow.
And in the beginning, Dave, I was in the produce business. So I started writing about produce. And honestly, who wants to read about produce? I mean, everybody writes about produce. So every once in a while, I would write about something going on in my life. And I found that people really, really enjoyed that. And I got the best response. Actually, one of my first blogs that was not about produce was, what is it really like to work with my sister? Because my sister was my business partner. And people just loved that. And so I realized I shifted, even though my CFO said, I hate your blog. You should only be writing about produce and promoting our business. I'm like, thank you very much. You won't be my CFO anymore. So I shifted to writing about business and life and what it's really like to be a CEO, what's really on my plate every day. And I've been doing it since, like I said, 2011. And when I sold my business in 2023, I took a break from business and I took a break from the blog. And a couple of my international business business friends said, whatever happened to that newsletter you sent? I really learned a lot. So it was people reaching out to me to say, I really enjoy it. And I actually learned a lot, that I started the blog back up in 2021, I think it was. And, or excuse me, 2024. And I only write about things that really happen. So, because I'm an executive coach and consultant, literally my clients give me fodder every single week to write. So good or bad, I have my conversations with them.
Sure.
And from them, I think, someone else could learn from this.
That's very cool. I love that. I love that you get some inspiration from your coaching clients. I love that, you started this back in the day, 2011, started as a blog, you're putting it out. That's really, really cool. Now, you mentioned working with your sister, and as I was going through the notes and the bio and everything that you've done, you're the former owner and CEO of Frieda Specialty Produce, based in Southern California. Hopefully I pronounced all that correctly.
No, you did not. It's
Frieda's. Okay.
Frieda's. That's my mom's name. Frieda.
I was wondering if that's what it was, because it says, in the notes, it says, hey, you at some point you went through and you purchased this, from your mother and so on and so forth. So this family-owned business, you're working with your sister. How was it working with your sister?
We're different. We're really different, have different personalities. So fortunately, when we negotiated the purchase from our parents, I knew enough to say we can't be 50-50 partners, because I'm a believer that in any kind of business, you need to have like someone who's the boss. So what I negotiated was that I would be the majority shareholder. So that meant at the end of the day, even if Jackie and I didn't get along or didn't agree on a decision, all things considered, someone would be there to make the decisions. So we had totally different, still have totally different styles. We don't work together anymore. We're just sisters now.
Right.
So I'm the visionary. Yeah, I'm the visionary. I'm the strategic person. She used to say to me that, Karen, you dream up these big ideas, and then my job is to execute on them. So she was more of an operational person. So
that's cool. So you complemented one another.
And 1000%. And that's I tell people in family business all the time that the key in a family business is to keep the family and the business separate, which is something that Jackie and I practiced. So, and that in the business, that there's always roles and responsibilities clearly defined. So I have a client right now who is a couple sisters, and it's very fuzzy how their responsibilities and accountabilities are defined. And that's one of the things I advise people, is just be really clear on the roles and responsibilities, what your title is and who you report to and what the deliverables are, and keep that, if you can, that emotionality, that family relationship separate from the business.
I think in my experience, working with family and friends is, I think if I went back and did it all over again, I wouldn't work with family and friends. Like if I could go back and rewind the clock, the number one thing I would never do is never work with a family member, never work with a friend. I would say that, the repercussions from that are never good, right? You always have one who puts in, I think, more than the other. You always have, these little disagreements that come up. And when you ultimately have to let that person go, or it doesn't work out, or whatever might happen, because everything has an expiration date, that relationship gets fractured. That's what I've seen. And so I think if I was to go into business, I would not do it with a family member. I would stay out. In the beginning, it sounds like a great idea. Oh man, this is a great person. I can trust them. We're family. Everything's going to work out. But it gets so messy. So I love what you talk about with, roles and responsibilities clearly defined. This is what your job is. This is what my job is. And then we're going to keep family separate. And I guess as you keep family separate, when things get tough or when lines get blurred, how do you keep those family interactions in a good way? What are some tips and tricks that you've used to keep those things fresh and alive without killing family?
So is that in the business or away from the business? Away
from the business. Like when you're just, you're celebrating Christmas, or you're celebrating New Year's, or you're celebrating the holidays, and you've had like these, these tough times at work, or, things haven't, happened the way. How do you keep those relationships alive on the personal side?
It's such a great question. You really have to work at it. So I don't usually talk about this, but so I ended up marrying someone that I worked with. I mean,
Okay.
obviously we're not married any longer, and we had kids together. And he worked for my mom, and we were married for a really long time and had two beautiful kids. But he's the one who brought it up. Ray, my ex-husband, brought it up that we should not talk about family at work, and we should not talk about business when we're at family events, because we used to have, family dinners together for Hanukkah or New Year's or Thanksgiving or birthdays or whatever. And he noticed my mom, my sister, and I would go right into business mode. And so his request to us was to not ever talk about business at home. So Jackie and I continued that process. It was really hard for my mom when she was alive because business was her life. So she loved talking about that. But we said, we're not going to talk about business, but we were very mindful about it. So I would say that the way to do it is to define it, to have that difficult conversation, to label it. So for example, so if I'm at work, meeting with my sister, I would say, okay, today I'm in the CEO role. I'm being the and I'm the boss. And so the conversation today is not about, do I love you? Do I not love you? Are you still my sister or not? That's the family side. But and I have to do that with my daughter. My daughter worked with me as well. We're having the work conversation now.
Yeah.
And then, but I acknowledged, that we're sisters, mother, daughter, all those relationships. And then, for me being the CEO, I was the boss and the mom and the oldest daughter is I personally chose to dial it down. So when we were at a home event, I would just kind of make sure that I wasn't like bossing everybody around. But I have to tell you something funny. My youngest daughter, excuse me, said to me after I sold the business, Mom, it's so much easier now, our relationship. I'm like, why is that? And she said, because I don't feel like you always felt like you were bossing me around. You were telling me what to do, like I worked for you. And Dave, I wasn't even aware that I was doing that. But when you work with friends and you work with family, it's really hard to discern what role am I in.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know I was doing that. But I've got this really strong, driven personality.
Right.
And so actually my relationship with both now, because I'm not that CEO anymore.
That's cool. That's cool. So the relationships have gotten better now that you're out of the CEO mentality and you're kind of there. That's really interesting. So you mentioned that your mom, her life was business, and she created this specialty produce business down in Southern California. How did she get started in the business? What was the first piece of this like?
So the way my mom would tell the story, she passed away about 6 years ago, by the way, at the ripe age of 96.
Oh, wow.
Is she was not ever someone who thought she'd have kids. And so then, she got pregnant and had me. And after she had me, this is how she would tell the story. She was looking for a new job that would give her flexible hours so she could breastfeed me.
Sure.
Okay. So my dad's aunt and uncle managed a produce company. And she remembers that they had kind of weird hours. So after I was born, a couple months after I was born, she called them up and said, hey, do you know anybody hiring? I'm looking for a new job, with flexible hours. And they said, Frieda, you called on the perfect day. Our bookkeeper just quit. You can start tomorrow. They didn't interview her. They didn't test her because she was going to work in accounting, and she, did not do great in math. And so she started by working, laughingly, kind of in a family business, right? And so then when they went away on vacation a few months later, they said, Frieda, you're kind of a member of the family. Would you mind coming in early every day and keeping an eye on things? So her regular hours were probably coming in at 6 a.m, but in the produce business, when you're on the produce market, you start at about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Holy
So
smokes.
she would kiss us goodbye at 1 o'clock in the morning. She would drive from where we lived in Orange County to downtown LA. There was not all the freeways we have right now. So she took surface streets, would get there at 2 o'clock to keep an eye on things. And while they were gone, she noticed the stack of mushrooms would come in, brown mushrooms in 10-pound boxes. And she was the cashier and no one was selling the mushrooms. So she thought, well, I guess I'll sell them. So she started selling the mushrooms. And then she sold out one day. And then the next day, a few more boxes of mushrooms came in and she sold them. And that kind of kept happening. And when my aunt and uncle got back from vacation, she said, I'll keep doing my bookkeeping work during the day, but do you mind if I keep coming in early and selling those mushrooms. It was kind of fun.
Hmm.
You don't even have to pay me extra. And so that's how she started her career. And if you can think back, this is the late 50s, there were no women working on the produce market. I mean, most women weren't working outside the home. So there she was at 2 o'clock in the morning in her dress, because there were no pants for women in business back in the day. And there she was, 2 o'clock in the morning, selling mushrooms, Frieda, and with her horn rimmed glasses. And she developed quite a reputation for being really open-minded. And I mean, she was pioneering. She was the first woman to work in the produce business. And then locally, the landlord of the produce market was the Southern Pacific Railroad.
Oh, wow.
And she ended up leaving, by the way, my aunt and uncle's business. And the railroad, the management came to my mom in the early 1962 and said, Frieda, we've been watching you, and there's an opening on the produce market. One of the companies has gone out of business. We think you should start your own business. And she's like, me? Are you kidding me? I don't know anything about business. They said, Frieda, we've been watching you. We think you have potential. So she launched her business. It was called Produce Specialties Incorporated on April 2nd, 1962. When she came in that day, she realized she wasn't going to have a sign for the building. She needed one. So she went into the Yellow Pages a couple weeks before the Yellow Pages, like paper.
Yep.
And she called the sign painter and said, hey, I need a sign for my company. Just have it up by Sunday night. So she walked in, 2 o'clock on Monday morning, and the sign was a pale lavender. So actually, the sign was the same
Oh,
color
wow.
as my current business cards. And because everyone always said, like, how did she pick purple? And she said, the sign painter said it was the only color he had on the truck that day, which of course, that's not true.
Right.
But I think the guy said, wow, this is a woman in a man's world. I need to help her stand out. And everyone else has blue and black and red and yellow and brown. And thank God he didn't pick pink. But this color purple stuck. And, in the produce business, you have forklifts and you have hand trucks. She painted everything that color. So when you walked in, it made it look really clean. Like the walls were lavender, the hand
Wow.
trucks were lavender. I don't have one right now, but we even signed our all of our checks with a purple pen. Everything was purple. And then of course, as I would go on to join the business and give talks about the company, and people would always say, oh, how did you pick the color purple as your company color? I said, well, my mom did a lot of research on marketing and strategy, and the color purple is considered regal and, like royalty, and it's the perfect complement to the greens and yellows and oranges in the produce department. But the reality is, it was a sign painter who, in a way, kind of had some vision.
Huh. That's very cool. I love that story. So you're just a kid growing up when all this is happening. You're kind of watching this from the front row.
Yes. Yes, I am.
And so, you're getting into what you must be in like teenage years at some point when this is happening. How do you decide, hey, I want to come work with my mom? When did you make that decision that I want to be a part of the family business? What was it that clicked and happened that brought you on that path?
So my mom said I could work summers. So even before I could drive, she let me, drive her into work. And I think it was more just keeping me busy in summer vacations and holidays. And so I would work since I was like 14 years old. I would go to work with my mom at 2 o'clock in the morning. Of course, I would take a nap on the little mini couch she had because she didn't come home till 5 o'clock. So,
Wow.
I guess it would be called child labor. And so I would work summers and vacations, and then, didn't really have an idea that I wanted to work in the business, went off to college, happened to go to an agricultural college in California called the University of California at Davis. It was just a coincidence. My college counselor, high school counselor, went to Davis, so he encouraged me to go there. And I didn't like it, but I'm still working summers for my mom. I went to another school, and then my mom's general manager came up to visit me. One day he was on business, and he said, let's go to dinner. So we went to dinner, and he said to me, Karen, I'm not going to be working forever. I'm planning to retire in a couple of years. And I know your mom is going to be looking for someone to run the business. And, you've worked in the business and worked summers, and you seem to like the sales thing. Maybe you should think about joining your mom in the business. And I'm, smiling. Okay. And then I go back home and I go to bed, and I remember literally waking up in the middle of the night and sitting up and saying to myself, oh my God, I don't need to be pre-law or pre-med or pre-whatever I was. Why don't I go into business with my mom? Why don't I work with my mom? So my dad was thrilled because I had transferred to a private women's college where the tuition was a lot. And now I'm going to transfer back to UC Davis because I could get a degree in the field, agricultural economics. And so I went back to Davis for 2 years. I got a degree in ag econ, and oh, by the way, notified my mom that would it be okay if I came to work for you? So we weren't a family business; it was just my mom. And so she's like, "Oh, never put pressure on me, never indicated that was a career path for me to consider." And she was thrilled. So no pressure. So she said, "That'd be good." So in my senior year, my mom made the decision, like it was so amazing. She made the decision to make a photocopy of every piece of correspondence that came in or went out of the company, made a copy for me. And I don't know if you're old enough to remember that old slick copy paper.
Yeah, I
It was
do
really
remember it.
heavy and very weighty.
Smeared.
So she would put them in an envelope, an envelope this size, right?
Yep.
And then she would mail it to me. So I got mail every week in college, like mail, like at a post office. And I would read everything so that when I joined the company in October of 1977, I actually knew what was going on in the business. And my mom thought I had to pay my dues, though. So I didn't come in and, become president. So I started literally in the basement. It was a 3-story building. In the basement, I took inventory. So I got to come in later. I'd come in at 4 a.m. That was my starting time. And I would do sales. And then back in the day, there was no computers, there was no cell phones, there was no digital cameras, there was no nothing. And you'd go down with a pad of paper with a pen, and you would take physical inventory, count how many boxes, what it was, what the lot number was. And I would try to get done before my pen froze because it was a refrigerated warehouse, right? So it was cold.
Yeah.
So take the inventory, and then after lunch, I would go work in the accounting department, or I would go work in marketing, and I might learn the business. So I remember one time my mom gave me the assignment of, so when I started out of college, my first assignment after taking inventory and doing sales was it would be called public relations now, was to get to know every food editor and food writer in America personally.
Whoa.
So my mom wanted me to help publicize our business. She introduced kiwifruit to America. We introduced in the next 60 years more than 200 new fruits and vegetables. And the only way people found out about exotic fruits and vegetables is they would read it in the food pages of newspapers, or they would see it in magazines. So my mom thought that it would be genius if I could get to know every food writer and food editor in America and give them samples or information on our products. They would write about them. They would come out in the paper. American consumers would read about them and go, oh, that sounds good. They would go to their grocery store and say, oh, do you have spaghetti squash? Oh, do you have sugar snap peas? Oh, do you have purple sweet potatoes? And sometimes the grocers had them. Sometimes they didn't. If they didn't have them, the multiple consumers would come in looking for what they read about in the food pages or in a magazine. So they would call, the produce manager would go, hey, I got these shoppers. They're looking for spaghetti squash. You know what that is? And then the buyer would, everywhere in America, and they would kind of work through, maybe directly, but maybe through brokers. And they would start calling around, hey, you ever heard of a spaghetti squash? And my mom had developed this reputation for not selling regular stuff. So she didn't sell regular oranges, tomatoes, onions, potatoes. She only sold weird stuff. They would call it the Frieda stuff. And eventually people would say, you know what? There's this lady in LA, Frieda Caplan. You should call her. If, maybe she has it, or maybe she knows where you could get it. So literally by me doing all this, public relations and the personal relationships, it wasn't any kind of like machine. It was like just me.
Yeah.
That it created demand, sophisticated marketing speak, created demand. And all of a sudden, all these male buyers, because all the buyers back in the day of the supermarket chains were men, they usually at that time didn't do the cooking or shopping. So here we were, the only women in the produce business. So we kind of represented their shopper. We could relate to them. So we had a great story to tell. Like, hey, this is what your shoppers are looking for. And oh, by the way, We can tell you what they're going to look for. And my mom was so smart. Like spaghetti squash, for example, is one of the first products that we put a label on. Because I don't know if you've ever seen a spaghetti squash, but it looks like a yellow football.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah.
And it's not obvious. Yeah, it's not obvious when you cook it and you open it up. Well, actually, it's not obvious how to cook it. So once you cook it and you cut it open and you take a fork or a spoon, it comes out looking like spaghetti.
Right.
Like, how are you going to know that? So my mom came up with the idea. We were the first people to do branding in the produce department. Is we created labels that we affixed to every single product. And on the spaghetti squash, I designed that label myself, by the way.
That's cool.
So it was not fancy. So it was a round label, and I did like a little drawing of it looks like a squash with some spaghetti. And then we had cooking instructions, and it said vegetable spaghetti squash. It's like vegetable low-cal spaghetti when cooked. And we put cooking instructions. And then my mom didn't cook, by the way. I did the cooking in the family because my mom was busy working from 2 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon. So my mom had this idea. There was room on one of her first packages. Her first package, by the way, was macadamia nuts in the shell.
Wow.
And the label guy she was working with says, like, there's some extra space on this label, Frieda. Like, do you want to put anything there? And she's like, oh, why don't you write down they could write us for recipes? And he goes, okay. But she didn't think, oh, if they write us for recipes, we're going to have some recipes, right? So all of a sudden, remember, there's no email. So people would handwrite letters to us. They would come in the mail, and thankfully, they would send in a stamped self-addressed envelope. Right. So all we had to do was put the recipes in the envelope and send it back to them. So one of the first jobs my sister and I had in the summers was we had to come up with these little recipe sheets. So we didn't have a test kitchen at the time. We didn't have anyone developing recipes. So we would read Sunset Magazine. We would read the Los Angeles Times. We would cut recipes out for our products. And then we took them and we taped them on a sheet of paper. Okay. And then we would photocopy them. Right. Actually, we'd print them in purple. Remember now, purple on white. And then someone would write us for recipes and we'd send them, we'd fold it up and stick it in the envelope and then we'd send it back. Sometimes it was the recipe. It wasn't. And so that was my first job, was doing, that was your question, was doing the kind of the marketing. But because my mom was so brilliant and came up with this idea of people writing for recipes, we developed, no one was doing this. We developed this rapport, this persona with consumers out there. So literally, I remember traveling all over the world, and people would say, you work for Frieda's? Is that the company that sells the weird produce? Is that that's the company with the purple labels, right? And it's a woman, right? Oh, you're her daughter. Oh gosh, because of you, I tried my first dragon fruit. Because of you, and we wrote a cookbook. I wrote a cookbook once called the Purple Kiwi Cookbook. You can imagine why I called it that.
Right.
Purple and then the kiwi fruit. We were people's first introduction, consumers' first introduction to exotic produce. And so eventually, obviously, we created a website. So back in 1995, we were the first company in the produce industry to have a website. Wow. And I remember telling my director of marketing, so we're going to have a website and we're going to put all our recipes up there and all our information. And she said to me, we can't do that. I'm like, why not? She said, well, then no one will have any reason to write to us or call us. Like all the food writers will have all our information. Our competitors will go on our website. They'll have all of our information. But I had a vision of what the future would look like, right? Yeah. Technology, right? I thought it was better to be open-minded. I call it, even now I do it, give the consulting for free ahead of time. And then people will join you, will come to you. So we created this website with all of recipes, all of our information. But to introduce it to the produce industry, I had to do a printed brochure. I mailed it out, snail mail, to my customers and said, are you getting the irony of this? I mailed a paper brochure to tell them to go on their computer and type in www.friedas.com, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
So
that is a great story. That's an inspiring story. I love that. So you're in the business and you're working, you traveled all over the world, you worked with family and your sister and your mom and all this. It's just an amazing story. What was the transition of ownership and management like for you? That had to be another big event in life, in business, in everything that you experienced?
So when I bought the business from my
Yeah.
mom,
Yeah. What was that like? What was that transition like? What was that like in management? That had to be interesting.
so I will say that so most time when people talk about family business transitions, not always, but most are from father to son or father to sons or sons
Yeah.
and daughters. So there back in that time, so I bought the business, we bought the business, my sister and I, from our parents. It was a community property state in California. So even though it was my mom's business, my parents were the owners in 1990. So I'll take you back 4 years. In 1986, I was vice president of the company, and I decided I wanted to be the president. So I went to my mom and I said, "So, Mom, I'm really doing the business of president, even though my title is vice president. I'm like basically running the business. I'd like you to make me president." And my mom was kind of surprised and said, "Well, let me think about that." So she went home and talked to my dad and said, "Look, Karen's really running the business. I don't really like the part about running the business. I love the products and the growers and selling and all the detail of the paperwork. I think it'd be really good to make Karen president." She went to a group of professional women, a group that she was in, and they highly recommended against my mom making me president. They said, "You know what? You're going to lose control. The transitions are always very difficult." But in her heart, she knew it was the right decision to make me president. So she comes in a few weeks later and says, "Well, I spoke to your father and I've talked him into making you president." I'm like, "Oh, that's great." And she said, "So I was thinking next April, it'll be 25 years in business. I'm thinking that, on our company anniversary, April 2nd, 1987, would be the perfect time to announce making you president." And I said, "Oh, I was thinking Tuesday." Tuesday is July 1st, is the beginning of a quarter. And I didn't tell her at the time, but I knew it would still be 30. And I wanted to be president of my company when I was 30 because I wanted to apply to be a member of YPO, which, by the way, they did not accept me, but that's a whole other story we don't need to talk about. But what I found with my mom is she knew you're talking about the transition, she knew her own limitations. The company was very small and stayed very small until I took over the business, running the business. And she knew that that I could take the company to the next level. And so the transition, I mean, it was a little bit bumpy because there were things I didn't know. But when my mom appointed me president on July 1st, 1986, she wrote a letter to all of our customers and to the industry and to all of our vendors. And she said, "Look, I made Karen president, and I'm going to take my first 2-week vacation because I have so much confidence in her." And as my mom was writing the letter, I said, "Mom, it's really important you put in there that nothing's going to change." And she said, "Absolutely not." She said, "I expect things to change. Your style and the way you do things should be different from me. So I am not going to put that in there." And when she put that she was going to go on her first 2-week vacation, she didn't say, "Well, I've gone on 1-week vacations before, I've gone on long weekend vacations," but she'd never taken a 2-week vacation before. But she just wanted to say to everyone in so many words that she had every confidence. So my mom kind of left me on my own for that first 2 weeks, which meant I had to make a lot of decisions. And I will tell you, that morning when I walked in, July 1st, 1986, I'll never forget walking up the yellow ramp to the warehouse at somewhere between 4 and 6 in the morning. And I remember how everything looked different that day. I mean, my ownership in the business hadn't changed yet. It wouldn't change for 4 years. But I remember walking in and just like everything looked different. And the decisions I made, the conversations I made, they became very, very different for me. Like I really kind of, as president and then eventually as owner, just looked at things with a very different perspective. So I usually would go to my mom and ask her opinion on things, but she was really careful to not tell me what to do. I would say, even though my mom was not super motherly and not very nurturing personally, she was very nurturing in business. It was okay with her for me to make mistakes. I'll never forget, I made some big mistake on rhubarb. I don't know if you know what rhubarb is. It looks like red celery. I bought and sold rhubarb, and I bought too much, and then I had to sell it for cheap. And I felt bad. I remember going to my mom saying, "Oh my God, we had a little disaster with the rhubarb." And she said, "Oh my God, the rhubarb. Let me tell you about my disaster with ginger from Fiji." and we would compare notes.
Hmm.
So she actually, was coaching me, but she let me experiment. And so one of the things I do now with clients who are in family businesses and who are concerned about transitions, I have a lot of firsthand experience of how to have a successful transition, right? Because I think it's really important. What I saw with a lot of other founders and business people who brought in the next generation, and in general, they're mostly men, is the dad has what I call a bag of wrenches. And the wrenches, they sit right down below their desk, right? So the son or daughter comes in with their latest idea. I call it the college kid syndrome. They've got like a great idea from something they took in college, and the dad reaches down below and he pulls out a wrench and throws it at them, right? Like, that's not the way we do it.
Yeah.
I tried that a long time ago. It doesn't work. So I try to coach people on how to manage the transition from both the person who's has the power and the one who'll be taking over, because it can be really touchy.
Yeah.
And there are going to be mistakes, and the next generation, or it could be just management, is not going to do things differently. And instead of keeping things a secret, it's really better to share what those bumps that you went through and experienced are, but not to say, by the way, you can't try new things because I've tried everything and they don't work. You have to do it my way. That's never going to work.
I love that. That's great advice. So you purchased the business, you run it for a long time, and then you had mentioned earlier that your daughter was working in the business with you. What made you decide to sell the business and not continue a third generation family business? What was the thinking there?
So it was, the thought. Both my sister were counting on my daughter to be the next generation. And then my daughter, it was coincidental with working with my business coach. I had all of my executives got to work with my business coach. But before Alex went on maternity leave, I guess she had some conversations with the business coach, who was so perceptive to ask her questions about her goals and her desires professionally. So when she got back from maternity leave, he's like, "Are you going to talk to your mom?" So she came in my office. My daughter's name is Alex, came in my office one day and said, "Mom, I want to talk to you." She said, "I love the business and I want to work in the business, but I don't want to own the business." And I said, "Thanks for telling me." A lot of people could react by being mad. Like, what do you mean you don't want to own the business? But she said, "Look, and it's kind of a risk thing. And I'm not sure if it's generational. I'm not sure if it's a millennial thing. It could be a personality thing. But the produce business, and Dave, from being a business owner yourself, I mean, it's a lot of personal risk, like personal risk. Like, there are days when sometimes I'm thinking, like, how am I going to make payroll?" And so I appreciated her honesty and I thanked her for it. And after she walked out of my office, I walked out of my office and I walked down to Jackie's office and I closed the door and I told her about our conversation. I said, "Well, so much for plan A. We're going to have to go with plan B." And plan B was we're going to have to sell the business. Not because we're having a fire sale, but because, like, I don't want to be working till I'm 90,
Right.
like my mom. So that was the decision. So we decided to hire an investment banker. So I interviewed investment bankers, and we decided on the company that we ended up working with. We didn't tell anyone in the business that we were going to go through this transaction, because sometimes people get really squirrely when they hear the company's going to be sold. So we really thought it was better to wait until we actually had a sale. And we know sometimes they fall out. Sometimes you want to sell a business and it doesn't happen. So the only person who knew about it was Alex, because she controlled sales. So I knew that was really important to have her involved in the process, because she would be part of the interview process. And so we went to market. We kept it confidential. We had a successful exit, ended up finding a strategic partner who was in our industry, and was backed by private equity, but had done 2 acquisitions in the produce industry. So we were the third. And they had all the things that I saw would make the business successful, which was they were in the same business, but not our product line. So we were in specialties, they were in vegetables. They had excess capacity in their facility. So I knew that I could add a lot of money to their bottom line shortly after the transaction, because we didn't own our building. We leased our building. Our lease would be up in a year. They could take our business, relocate our facility and activities into theirs, and put a ton of money to their bottom line just by that synergy.
Wow.
And so my daughter still works in the business. This month will be 3 years since we sold the company, and the business is thriving and growing. And the synergy of joining three companies together with all of their different resources, their packaging, and their financial wherewithal has really helped the company grow. I think sales have probably increased 50 to 100% over
Wow.
when I had the business.
Wow, that's phenomenal. What a great story. So you go through all of that process, you sell the business, you're a very successful entrepreneur, and you get into golfing, and you're doing different things, but then you decide to throw your hat back in the ring and you become an executive coach. So now you're executive coach, you're a consultant. What was it that drew you back in, and what are you excited about in the coaching business, and what are the things that you're offering in coaching?
So what drew me in? So, your brain is a muscle, just like a muscle,
Yep.
right? And if you don't exercise it, it will atrophy.
Hmm.
And I'm still young. I sell the business. I don't want to be stale. I
Right.
want to be relevant. My husband is very active, as you know, in business. I meet a ton of business people all the time. At my core, I'm a business person. So I thought I took a year off, and a friend of mine had advised, she said, it will come to you what you want to do. If you want to do anything, it will come to you what you want to do. And literally after about 8 months, I realized, you know what? I could help other entrepreneurs. I could help other business owners. I could help other executives. The firsthand knowledge I have of running a large, medium to large family business, in the food business, in the distribution business, I could be really helpful to people. So I decided I wanted to do executive coaching and consulting. And of course, the difference between a coach and a consultant is the coach asks a lot of questions so you can figure out what you want to do. A consultant gives advice.
Yeah.
So I kind of sit right in the middle. I can't help myself sometimes when it's really obvious what someone should do. I mean, why not save them the time and the money and just kind of give them the advice? So I decided that's what I wanted to do. So the first thing I did, of course, besides resurrecting my blog, is I launched a website. I pretty good at getting press coverage. So I was very fortunate that a big industry publication asked if they could do a story on my coaching business, and they did. And I still am active in business organizations. So I get my name out there. I get most of my clients through referrals. You mentioned golf. I met one of my clients on the golf course in Pebble Beach.
Oh, wow.
I met her husband there, and we started, talking at the end, like, what do you do? And what do you do? And then all of a sudden, I'm coaching the CEO of a frozen dessert business in Australia. So I think, so that's why I do what I do. I still have a lot of downtime. So I don't want to do this full time.
Yeah.
But, if I have between 5 and 10 active clients at any one time, and is perfect. And my ideal client size is somewhere between 10 and 200 million. That's the right, privately held. That's the right size for me. Hopefully with a management team, because I can really help with that.
Sure.
And I think, what I bring to my clients is I've actually done their job. I've sat in their seats. So I was talking with I have a client who I coach. He has a coaching business, and so we're collaborating together, and I'm doing a little bit of coaching with him. And he was describing a couple of his clients, and I said to him when we were talking, I said, well, based on what you've told me, I asked a lot of questions. It sounds like your client is like this, has this challenge, and should consider this, this, and this. And he's like, how did you figure that out so fast? I said, well, that's kind of like from experience. And I asked you some questions, and I'm pretty perceptive in the business world. So I can figure out stuff pretty quickly. So what I bring to a client is I've sat in your seat, and I can help you navigate pretty fast, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I've had clients sometimes, and they usually graduate. I don't have lifetime clients. So they usually graduate in somewhere between 6 and 18 months. Unless it's a really small client who I'm actually kind of like their thought partner.
Sure.
Right. And, I really love it. And I love business. And so I don't just work in produce. So I have clients in the IT space. I have clients in the distribution space, and the marketing space, food, different CPG products. So I love it. And then writing my blog has really been a way to get the word out there. And
Yeah.
like you said, you read it every once in a while when you have time because you're busy traveling. And hopefully what you say is what someone has said to me, several people have said to me is, that's exactly what I was thinking about this week. I exactly had that challenge. I learned so much from you.
Yeah. It's a great blog. I really love it. I thought that I read it every time I got it, but I don't know what happened there, along the line. But I enjoy it. I look forward to it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool. That's coming out. All right, that's good. I think even at one point I said, man, Jack, this was I can't remember exactly what it was about, but I said, man, this was a great article that Karen wrote. So it's
Yes.
there's a lot of good work that you're doing there. So if anybody wants to work with you, if they're looking for an executive coach that has, I mean, what a plethora of experience you have. I mean, just incredible, the way that you came up in the business, the way that you started from the ground floor, worked all the way up, worked up to vice president, took over presidency, took on the business, worked in the family dynamic, sold your business to private equity. I mean, just that entire journey, right? Just incredible. How can anybody get in touch with you if they're interested in potentially working with you?
Well, thank you. Go to my website. So my website is karencaplan.com, my name. So KarenCaplan.com. And you can get my blog. You can say book an appointment. And the best thing is to book an appointment with me. Someone could call me, but the best thing really is to send me an email to book an appointment. So I didn't mention to you that about 11 years ago, my mom was still alive. I decided I wanted to get her on film, right? I wanted to hire a videographer
Yeah.
and, kind of ask her questions. And my director of marketing said, we should make a movie. And I'm
Oh,
like, no, we sell produce. We're not making a movie. And she was really great. She talked me into it. We collaborated with a filmmaker, and he created a full-length documentary called Fear No Fruit. Fear No Fruit, obviously, all these exotic produce items that we taught people not to fear. And that movie, that full-length documentary, is available on my website. It's about 96 minutes. It's the story of my mom, our company, and our family. And it's award-winning. And I was actually just featured in July on some global website. They reached out to me and said, we just love the movie, even though it came out in 2015.
wow.
So all that's on my website. Or they could just
That's
call Dave
awesome.
Westcott and you could, hook me up.
That's right. I'll do both. Right. We'll do both. We'll hit it from both angles. I love it. I'm going to check out the movie for sure. I mean, I've had I could talk to you all day. This has been it's been a wonderful
So you need to make sure
time.
your
And
kids and your wife watch the movie with you together, since I've met your wife and kids.
I will do it. We will do it this week. It's an exciting thing. And I love for them to learn, learning is at a young age, their minds are so ripe and ready to grow. It's very, very cool and very, very exciting. And it's been so wonderful chatting with you. I only have one question left. You've been so generous with your time today. And my last question is, we have a big whiteboard, a big billboard on the side of the road, one phrase, one sentence, one word, whatever it is. What would you want to leave with the world today?
But what I want to leave with the world today, I would say passion. Like I am, if you can't tell by talking to me, like I am so passionate. I'm passionate about my produce. I'm passionate about my family. I'm passionate about business. I'm passionate about talking about, what we've done. So passion.
You are very passionate.
And
I
passion
love
fruit
that.
happens to be my favorite fruit. By the way, passion fruit happens to be my favorite fruit too.
Passion fruit makes a good drink. I like the passion fruit drinks. And just as kind of a side note, you guys introduced the kiwi fruit to America, and you're responsible for spaghetti squash, sugar snap peas, red seedless watermelons, dragon fruit, fresh ginger root, purple sweet potatoes, just to name a few of what you have brought to the world. So if any listener out there has enjoyed any of those things, it's because of Frieda and family, right? I mean, that's
That's right.
That's why it's all here. Well, listen, this has been a fantastic show. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all the knowledge you've shared with us. I got 2 pages of notes here. I've learned so much from you today. It's been absolutely outstanding. This is the Entrepreneurial Journey. I'm your host, Dave Westcott. We are back 9:15 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every Tuesday. If you like this show, give us a like, give us a share, drop your comments into the comment box, and we'll get back to you. Karen, thank you so much for your time today. You have been absolutely wonderful to spend the morning with.
Thanks, Dave.
Every CEO's journey has its Everest. The moments when the path forward feels steep, uncertain, and alone. With Sherpa CEO coaching, you don't climb alone. Our experienced coaches are your guides, helping you break through barriers, sharpen your strategy, strengthen your leadership, and build a team that can carry you higher. With tailored one-on-one coaching, strategic planning, and real accountability, your summit is within reach. Sherpa CEO Coaching, your guide to confidence, clarity, and extraordinary business growth. Get coached and learn more at sherpaceo.com.